People often assume prison is where everything ends. Arrested, convicted, the door shuts. That is it. But Corcoran is different. This is a place where even a life sentence is not always the final period. Behind concrete walls in a California valley, there are inmates with files so thick that nobody wants to read them all. Not because they are long, but because every page points to the same truth. Their violence did not stop when it should have. This video is the top 9 most dangerous inmates currently held at Corcoran. Not to make them look cool, but to face one uncomfortable question. What makes a person so dangerous that even prison has to stay on guard? Number 9. Jaime Osuna. In November of 2011, in the city of Bakersfield, police were called to a room at the El Morocco Motel. Inside, they found Yvette Peña, age 37, deceased. Investigators said the scene suggested this was not a sudden act, but the end of a long pattern of control and violence. They said the evidence indicated the victim felt fear before it was over. Jaime Osuna quickly became the focus of the investigation. At first, Osuna denied everything. From jail, he appeared on local television and spoke calmly about the case, as if it were a misunderstanding. But over time, the file grew. It included statements and physical evidence. Prosecutors also alleged there were signs he tried to intimidate and control people who might testify. In March of 2017, Osuna pleaded guilty in a deal that spared him a death sentence. 2 months later, the court sentenced him to life in prison, with no possibility of release. Yvette Peña's family asked for the sentencing date to fall on her birthday, as a way to close the case with justice for the woman they lost. For many people, that should have been the end, but Osuna's story did not end there. In March of 2019, at Corcoran State Prison in California, an inmate named Luis Romero was found deceased in a cell. Osuna, who shared the cell, was immediately identified as a suspect. Officials said the details were so serious that Osuna was placed in long-term, highly restrictive housing, a level reserved for people considered among the most dangerous, even inside prison. Prosecutors described the prison case as especially severe, and the legal process moved cautiously and slowly. At one point, the court found Osuna was not competent to stand trial. He was transferred to mandatory treatment facilities before the case could continue. What makes Jaime Osuna frightening is not only what happened outside prison. It is the fact that, according to officials, the violence did not stop when the cell door closed. Even in a tightly controlled place like Corcoran, the system still had to lock him down even further. On a list of the most dangerous inmates at Corcoran, Osuna is a cold reminder. For some people, even the harshest sentence is still not enough to end the danger they bring with them. Number 8. Dana Ewell. On Easter Sunday, April 19, 1992, inside a spacious home in the Sunnyside neighborhood of Fresno, 3 members of the Ewell family were found shot to death. There were no signs of robbery, no struggle, and the scene was so clean it resembled a planned execution rather than an impulsive act. Investigators quickly realized it was a homicide that came from within the family. The only son, 21-year-old Dana Ewell, appeared on television portraying a grieving young man, speaking about his parents in a calm, almost cold tone. The investigation later revealed that if the entire family were dead, Dana would gain control of assets worth around $8 million. The key to the case lay in a Feather AT-99mm semi-automatic firearm, a rare weapon purchased in Reseda on March 23, 1992, by Ernest Jack Ponce. He admitted buying it on behalf of Joel Radovchich, Dana's close friend. Along with the AT-9 came a Green Mountain barrel and a homemade silencer. Ballistic analysis matched the bullets and marks to those found at the Ewell residence. Ponce later led police to the site where the barrel had been buried. The kind of evidence concealment that takes weeks to plan, not minutes. While Fresno was still in mourning, Dana and Radovchich moved into the very same house that had been the crime scene, spending large amounts of cash, taking helicopter lessons, traveling, and living lavishly. Investigators observed that they used payphones and pagers to communicate, avoiding landlines. Behavior not of innocent students, but of people who believed they were being monitored. During one recorded call at a payphone, Radovchich was heard saying, "They don't have any evidence," in the confidence of a man who thought he was smarter than the investigation. The motive, the weapons trail, Ponce's testimony, and the ambush setup inside the house all came together into one picture. Dana Ewell had orchestrated and planned the murders of his parents and sister in exchange for control of the family fortune. In 1998, The jury returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, multiple victims, premeditation, and financial motive. Dana received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Radovcic received the same. Today, Dana Ewell is held in the Protective Housing Unit at California State Prison Corcoran, a special section separated from the general population. A man who once erased his entire family for money now lives under strict control, serving a sentence with no way out. Number 7. Horus Vanvaultz. In July 1981, in Montclair, California, a passerby discovered the body of 21-year-old Selena Keogh in the bushes near a residential area. In 1986, in Burbank, about 40 miles away, police found 22-year-old Mary Dugan inside the trunk of her own car. 2 cases, 2 different counties, with no clear link. Yet the method was the same: quiet, controlled, and leaving almost no trace. At that time, the concept of DNA analysis did not exist. Both files were placed among the unsolved cases. Nearly 40 years later, technology had advanced beyond what anyone could have imagined. In 2019, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office launched its first investigative genealogy DNA program, known as IgG. Old biological samples from both cases were uploaded to the GED Match database. The algorithm compared thousands of genetic relatives and narrowed the results to a single match: 64-year-old Horus Vanvaultz Jr., living in Pomona. Detectives quietly collected DNA from discarded items belonging to him, and the results matched the biological samples preserved from 1981 and 1986. In November that year, Vaultz was arrested. At that time, it was the first prosecution in Los Angeles County based on investigative genealogy. When his background was reviewed, another detail surfaced. Vaultz had been charged in 1988 in Ventura County for the killing of Jana Rowe, but was acquitted. Later, modern DNA confirmed a genetic match to Rowe's case, yet due to the double jeopardy principle, the court could not retry him. The Keogh and Dugan cases became the foundation that finally exposed him. The 2022 trial described Vaultz as highly calculated and disturbingly elusive, a man capable of taking 2 lives in 2 counties, then living normally for decades. In August 2022, the jury found him guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, multiple victims, and the crimes committed during sexual assaults. In September, the judge sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole. On September 19, 2022, Vaultz was transferred to California State Prison Corcoran, under the authority of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. The agency did not disclose his housing unit, only confirming that he is serving a life without parole sentence. In June 2024, the California Supreme Court rejected his appeal, and by April 2025, he filed a federal habeas petition, a move considered little more than a formality. Horus Vanvaultz stands as one of the clearest examples of modern forensic evolution. Genealogy can close cases once thought forever frozen in time, 3 decades of silence. And in the end, his own old cells broke that silence, sealing his fate with a sentence that leaves no way out inside Corcoran. Number 6. Efren Saldivar. In the late 1990s, the respiratory unit at Glendale Adventist Medical Center began noticing a disturbing pattern. The number of overnight deaths increased significantly whenever 29-year-old respiratory therapist Efren Saldivar was on duty. Shift logs showed his name repeatedly connected to the final hours of elderly and critically ill patients who required continuous respiratory support. No one could draw conclusions, since every chart listed natural causes. In March 1998, an anonymous call to Glendale police triggered the entire investigation. "There's an angel of death working in the hospital." Late on March 11th, Saldivar walked into the station himself and confessed to taking around 40 to 50 patients' lives using muscle relaxants, pancuronium, also known as Pavilon, and sometimes succinylcholine, drugs capable of causing respiratory paralysis when abused. Soon after, he retracted his statement once an attorney intervened. With no chemical evidence in the bodies to prove his claim, he was released. For many, that seemed like the end. For investigators, it was only the beginning. The following year, the task force reconstructed mortality curves according to work shifts, reviewing over 1,000 deaths that matched Saldivar's schedule. They obtained court approval to exhume 20 graves of deceased patients, since most other bodies had been cremated. Tissue samples were sent to the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, often called the final stop, for cases with almost no evidence. In early 2001, the lab reported that 6 of the 20 samples contained pavilon residues. It was the piece investigators had been waiting for, a compound that could not exist in the body without outside interference. In January 2001, Saldivar was arrested again and charged with 6 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. During questioning, he described killing patients as like stealing chewing gum. You do it and forget it. The chilling remark left the interrogation room in silence. In March 2002, he pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. A second confession was read in court during sentencing. Saldivar admitted to killing more than 100 people, saying his motive was simply to make his job easier. And at trial, prosecutors listed the 6 victims, whose forensic evidence directly tied to the crimes. All had died during night shifts under Saldivar's care. On April 18, 2002, the court sentenced him to 6 consecutive life without parole terms. How did he go undetected for so long? First, most victims were elderly or critically ill, so paperwork easily listed natural causes. And second, succinylcholine breaks down rapidly, while pavilon can only be detected if the correct tissue is sampled and analyzed with highly sensitive methods, something routine autopsies of that era did not perform. Third, at the time, hospital control over muscle relaxants was far less strict than today. Efren Saldivar is now serving his life without parole sentence at California State Prison Corcoran. With no chance of release and no public interviews permitted, his prison file remains minimal. In forensic and medical ethics courses, the name Angel of Death is not a title. It is a label for a catastrophic failure paid for in human lives, and a reminder of why both the healthcare and justice systems were forced to change after 2003. Number 5. Scott Dyleski, Lafayette, California, on the morning of October 15, 2005. In a house deep within the woods of Hunsaker Canyon, 52-year-old Pamela Vitale, wife of criminal defense attorney Daniel Horowitz, stopped answering her phone. When Horowitz returned home, police were called, and the area was sealed off. Within hours, the incident became front-page news across California, a homicide inside a private residence, with evidence suggesting the attacker knew the terrain and struck quickly. A week earlier, an online order for indoor grow lights had been placed using the credit card of a neighbor, Karen Schneider. The person who made the purchase was 16-year-old Scott Dyleski, who lived nearby with his mother and a group of friends interested in indoor plant cultivation. His only mistake was entering the wrong billing address. The package was delivered to the Vitale Horowitz residence. When Schneider noticed the unauthorized charge, investigators believed Dyleski feared exposure and broke in to retrieve the evidence. Detectives recovered a ski mask, gloves, and a pair of athletic shoes near the scene. Forensic testing revealed Dyleski's DNA on the victim's foot, and traces of Vitale's DNA on the mask and gloves. The shoe prints matched the type Dyleski owned, clearly visible on a plastic container lid inside Vitale's home. In his bedroom, police found a handwritten to-do list that included phrases such as disable, erase traces, destroy related items. The trail from the stolen credit card to the misdirected order, to the break-in, to the dual DNA evidence, and finally to the shoe print, formed a complete chain of proof. On October 20th, 2005, Dyleski was arrested and charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances, the killing committed during a residential burglary. The trial began in August 2006 at the Contra Costa County Superior Court. Prosecutors described the case as a break-in at the wrong house at the wrong time. There were no accomplices, no confession, only forensic evidence, and it was enough. The jury returned a verdict of life without the possibility of parole. Because he was 16 at the time of the offense, Dyleski was spared the death penalty, but his freedom was effectively gone. In 2009, the Court of Appeal upheld the conviction. By 2017, Senate Bill 394 was passed, allowing inmates convicted under 18 to be eligible for parole review after 25 years, even with an LWOP sentence. Dyleski's punishment was converted to 25 to life, making him eligible for parole consideration in 2030. After spending years in facilities including San Quentin and Kern Valley, Dyleski is now serving his sentence at California State Prison Corcoran. No records indicate violence or disciplinary issues during incarceration. Within Corcoran, he is known by the nickname the Lafayette Kid, a teenager who committed an adult's crime and carries an adult sentence. A single mistake in an online billing address triggered a chain of events that ended with a 25 to life sentence. The Pamela Vitale case remains a textbook example of how forensic science and digital trace technology can map the path of a crime, from one click of a mouse to the steel bars of Corcoran. Number 4. Mikhail Markhasev. Before dawn on January 16, 1997, along Interstate 405 in the Sepulveda Pass area of Los Angeles, the road was nearly empty. 27-year-old Ennis Cosby, the son of comedian Bill Cosby, pulled his black Mercedes to the shoulder to change a flat tire. His girlfriend, Stephanie Crane, had just arrived and turned on her headlights to help. A man approached, pulled something from his jacket, and shouted, "Open the door!" Crane panicked, backed the car away, and heard a single sharp gunshot echo through the canyon. When she returned, Ennis was lying motionless beside the wheel. The Los Angeles Police Department launched a major investigation, assembling a special task force. Detectives found a .38 caliber revolver and a dark blue knit cap near the scene. There were no usable fingerprints, but several strands of hair were recovered from inside the cap. More than a month later, an anonymous tip reached police. The caller was an acquaintance of the suspect, motivated by a $100,000 reward. The name he gave was Mikhail Markhasev, 18 years old, originally from Ukraine, living in the Pasadena area. He had connections to a small group of street youths and often visited a Russian-American apartment complex in Glendale. Investigators collected a hair sample from Markhasev, and forensic testing confirmed that the hairs found in the cap matched his genetic profile. Ballistics analysis also determined that the fatal bullet came from the recovered .38 caliber weapon. 3 witnesses, Sarah Peters, Eli Zachariah, and Michael Chang, testified that, in the days following the shooting, Markhasev bragged that he had fired on the hill, smirking as he said it. Later, a handwritten letter was seized from jail, in which he described details of the scene, mentioned the gun, the car's position, and used hateful language toward the victim. Though the defense argued the letter was fabricated, the court accepted it as corroborating evidence. In August 1998, the jury convicted Markhasev of first-degree murder and armed robbery. The judge sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole, plus 10 years. At 19 years old, Markhasev began a life sentence with no way out. 3 years later, in February 2001, from his cell at California State Prison, Corcoran, Markhasev wrote a letter to California Deputy Attorney General Kyle Brody. "I am guilty. I no longer wish to appeal. I apologize to the Cosby family, and I want to do what is right." The letter stunned prosecutors and the media alike. It was the only formal confession ever sent from within Corcoran, and it closed the case entirely. Since then, Markhasev has served his sentence in Corcoran's high-security unit, with no records of violence or complaints. He lives quietly among other notorious inmates, men who neither know nor care that he once drew national attention with a single gunshot in the night. The Ennis Cosby case was not only the tragedy of a famous family, but a lesson in cruel coincidence. A man stops to change a tire, a stranger passes by, and in a few seconds, a decision seals a life sentence inside Corcoran. Number 3. George Wayne Smith. Afternoon of May 9, 1980, Norco, California. The Security Pacific National Bank branch had just reopened after its lunch break. At exactly 3:40 p.m. 5 armed men stormed inside. They carried an AR-15, an HK-93, a G3, shotguns, homemade explosive devices, and even a long sword. They wore body armor and military-style backpacks. Leading them was 27-year-old George Wayne Smith, a former mechanic obsessed with survivalist and end-of-days literature. He believed society was collapsing, and that this robbery was preparation for Judgment Day. They seized roughly $20,000 before the alarm went off. Riverside County deputies arrived within minutes. In the middle of town, a full-scale gun battle erupted. Police armed with revolvers faced off against men carrying automatic rifles. Bullets ripped through the bank walls and shattered glass everywhere. When cornered, the group jumped into a truck, threw homemade bombs to slow pursuit, and sped toward the highway. The chase stretched more than 25 miles through the Little Creek mountain area. Over 30 patrol cars were hit by gunfire. A police helicopter was also struck and forced to make an emergency landing. When the pursuit reached Little Creek, the group ambushed officers again. Amid the chaos, Deputy James Evans was fatally shot, and 8 other officers were injured. 2 robbers, Belisario and Manuel Delgado, were killed in the final standoff. Smith and the Harvin brothers, Christopher and Russell, were captured after running out of ammunition, surrounded by SWAT units. In the early 1980s, the Riverside County Court held the Norco trial. Prosecutors described Smith as an apocalyptic survivalist who believed violence was the first step toward salvation. The jury found him guilty of 46 felony counts, including murder, armed robbery, assault on law enforcement, and conspiracy to use explosives. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, a ruling that remains unchanged to this day for Smith and his surviving accomplices. But the consequences of Norco went far beyond that courtroom. Before the incident, most California officers were issued only .38 caliber revolvers. After Norco, departments across the state adopted semi-automatic rifles, such as the Mini-14, M16, and AR-15, along with ambush response training, a tactical shift that continues today. The Norco robbery is widely regarded as the beginning of the modern active shooter concept in U.S. police training. The 46 felony convictions ended one of the rare moments when law enforcement and criminals fought each other like two military units. The images of burning patrol cars along the highway, a helicopter riddled with bullet holes, and a bank torn apart by gunfire became mandatory study material in police academies nationwide. Today, George Wayne Smith is serving his life without parole sentence at California State Prison Corcoran. In a rare interview from his cell, he said he once believed he was doing what was right for his faith. But after decades behind bars, he sees only a chain of choices that destroyed many lives. 45 years later, Norco 80 is still remembered as the most violent bank robbery in California's history, where an apocalyptic fantasy turned into a real battlefield and ended behind the steel bars of Corcoran. Number 2. Binh Thai Luc. San Francisco, March 23, 2012. The small home at 16 Houth Street in the quiet Ingleside neighborhood sat tucked among the city's steep hills. That morning, a relative came to visit and found the door unlocked. When police entered, they discovered 5 members of the Le Chu family deceased. The neighborhood was immediately sealed off, even as residents were heading to work. 2 days later, officers arrested 35-year-old Binh Thai Luc, an acquaintance of the family. Luc had a prior record for armed robbery and assault with a firearm in Santa Clara during the late 1990s, serving nearly 10 years at San Quentin. In 2006, after completing his sentence, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement issued a deportation order, but it could not be carried out because Vietnam had not yet signed a repatriation agreement for immigrants who arrived before 1995. Luc was released back into the community and relocated to the Bay Area. According to investigators, during the night of March 22nd into the early hours of the 23rd, Luc visited the Lay family's home, people he had known through past business dealings. The investigation uncovered a sequence of forensic evidence, DNA traces, movement patterns, and physical items linking him to the scene, forming a complete evidentiary chain. Prosecutors told the court that a hammer was believed to have been used, though no single motive was confirmed. Financial or personal disputes were considered possible. The trial lasted 5 years, generating thousands of pages of testimony and forensic records. On December 11, 2017, the jury found Luc guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder, 5 counts of attempted robbery, and 2 counts of burglary, while acquitting him of completed robbery charges. On March 1, 2018, Judge Carol Yagi sentenced him to 5 consecutive life without parole terms, one of the heaviest sentences in San Francisco history. In court, the judge spoke briefly. 5 victims, 5 sentences. Justice can only be complete through permanence. After sentencing, both federal and state immigration agencies reopened the unexecuted deportation order of 2006, calling it a prime example of a legal gap between the United States and Vietnam. In March 2018, Binh Thai Luc was transferred to California State Prison Corcoran to begin serving his sentence. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation confirmed his incarceration and reported no significant disciplinary incidents. Among inmates, he is known by the nickname the Man from Houth Street, the man whose crime shook San Francisco and forced immigration officials to reevaluate a policy loophole that had existed for more than a decade. From an unenforced deportation order to 5 consecutive life sentences, the story of Binh Thai Luc is not only the tragedy of one family, but also a case study in how a small administrative gap in federal law can lead to irreversible human loss. Number 1. Joseph James DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer. California State Prison. Corcoran, 2021. Inside the protective housing unit, where inmates requiring extreme security or protection are kept, a 79-year-old man lives quietly, day by day. He was once a police officer, and for 12 years, he terrified the entire state of California. His name, Joseph James DeAngelo, known to the world as the Golden State Killer. The story began in Visalia in 1974, when hundreds of bizarre burglaries plagued the area. The intruder rarely stole money. He ransacked homes, took small personal items, and left chaos behind. Locals called him the Visalia Ransacker. On September 11, 1975, Professor Claude Snelling was shot and killed while trying to stop the intruder from abducting his daughter. Between 1976 and 1979, the attacks moved north toward Sacramento. Residents called him the East Area Rapist. His method was ritualistic. He stalked victims for days, broke in at night, forced the male partner to lie face down, and stacked dishes on his back to detect movement. His pattern of control and cruelty haunted middle-class neighborhoods across California. After DeAngelo was fired from the police force in 1979 for shoplifting, the murders began. He moved south, and investigators began calling him the original Night Stalker. His victims spanned the state: Brian and Katie Maggiore, Sacramento, 1978; Robert Offerman and Deborah Manning, Santa Barbara, December 30th, 1979; Charlene and Lyman Smith, Ventura, 1980; Keith and Patrice Harrington, Donna Point, 1980; Manuela Huithun, Irvine, 1981; Cherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez, Goleta, 1981; Janelle Cruz, Irvine, 1986, the final known victim. Then he vanished. Thousands of DNA samples, witness reports, and case files piled up over decades. None led to a match. Until 2018, when a new technology changed everything. Using genetic genealogy and the GED match database, investigators traced a family tree and found a branch leading to former police officer Joseph DeAngelo. Detectives collected DNA from his car door handle and a tissue discarded in his trash. The results were a perfect match to crime scene evidence. On April 24, 2018, DeAngelo was arrested. 2 years later, on June 29, 2020, inside Sacramento State University's auditorium, he pled guilty to 13 counts of murder, 13 counts of kidnapping for robbery, and admitted to 161 additional crimes involving 61 victims. The longest formal confession in California's history. On August 21, 2020, the court sentenced him to 11 life without parole terms, 15 additional life sentences, and 8 extra years. The prosecution stated, "No death sentence could ever deliver justice as swiftly as a lifetime behind bars." On January 26, 2021, DeAngelo was transferred to CSP Corcoran, placed inside the protective housing unit, an isolated facility reserved for inmates who cannot be placed in the general population. Since then, he has spoken to almost no one, taking only short walks in a small exercise yard each day. 45 years after his first known crime, the Golden State Killer's reign of terror ended where California holds its most infamous inmates. Corcoran, a man who once understood the system well enough to hide inside it, now lives confined by it, serving the rest of his life in silence.